very interesting explanation. So, and shift and win. So let me also say something slightly on common external tariff. There's been a lot of argument over it, and trade diversion. Schiff and Winters, they have written a very good book on regional integration. They argue that even though regional integration blocks almost always increase trade between members, sometimes they lead to trade diversion. So trade diversion, as you know, takes place when, because of common external tariffs, regional bloc diverts trade by substituting intra-bloc imports for imports from outside the bloc. So the consequences of trade diversion is that the preference granting country ends up paying more for the imports from within the bloc, and the increased payments to producers in partner countries is financed by monies that initially accrued to government as tariff revenue. So money that they initially got by import when they imported goods. The revenue that they got from that is lost, and that is what we say they used to pay for the production of these goods in the partner states in the bloc. So these are some of the hypotheses or theories that have been used to try to understand what happened. It was used first, these were used first to predict what would happen if the EU10 moved to the EU15, and then to analyze whether that is indeed what happened. So the question then is, what really happened? So as I've said, it was always anticipated that the enlargement would trigger massive migration from new member states to the EU15, because that was the main fear, that once you opened the eastern and central borders of the continent, then you will have everyone moving from east and central down to the west. So studies have however shown that because many reasons, among them transitional restrictions on labor mobility that was imposed, were imposed by, in many of the EU 15 countries, the EU 15 countries anticipated this movement, and they were very fearful, so they came up with a lot of restrictions to forestall any possible migration, massive migration of labor or migrants from the new countries. And also, the creation of a free labor market took a very long time. So the pattern of migration turned out differently. So immediately after accession, indeed, there are reports that indicate some new member states recorded massive migration to the EU 15. So immediately, because many of the Eastern and Central European countries, members of those countries, when they looked at migration, they saw this essentially, one of the benefits they could immediately see they would derive from it was moving into a market that was more productive, getting employment opportunities. So there was some kind of immediate rush from the east to the west. But as I said, capital was also moving towards the EU 10. So because of the capital flow from the EU 15 to the EU 10, which led to relatively high activity rates in the domestic economies of the EU 10 and improved conditions, some of the new member states reported very low figures of migration. So after that brief period when they rushed to the EU 10, the capital started flowing into the new region, and a lot of economic activity was generated, and so there was no need to continue going to the EU 15. So studies that I went through therefore indicated that integration contributed to lower unemployment rates for the new member states. So that's when the capital had flown, so there was no need to actually go. So, which was contrary to what had been expected. So this is attributed to the high economic growth and the effects of sustainable modernization. So Karasinska-Fendler writes on Poland and reports that after only 4 years of EU membership, Poland's unemployment had dropped by almost half, and its normal salary had risen by more than 50%. And because of high flow of FDI, it had created approximately 1.2 million jobs. That is just after 4 years. So the fears that were there on the eve of the enlargement, that accession would lead to displacement of workers or loss as a result of the localization of trade or relocation of industries, agglomeration of industries, had mixed results. So in the case of Malta, for instance, there had been fears that the removal of protectionist tariffs would wipe out indigenous manufacturing base, resulting in unemployment. So while and also that the elimination of state subsidies, which was required by, because of the customs union, would kill the shipyards. Malta depends very much on its ship industry. But that did not happen. So, one of the reasons why it did not happen is that the EU had anticipated this, and this is where I'm going. The EU had anticipated that these things would happen, and so they had anticipated the costs, and they had proffered to this, provided or proffered to the states support in the form of pre-accession assistance, so to enable those countries to prepare for enlargement. So EU had provided funds for them to prepare for accession. So let me do my conclusion. The EU enlargement of 2004 scenario is, however, likely to be seen clearly when we get new members, when other East African countries like the Republic of South Sudan and Somalia decide to join the EAC. There's already, as you know, substantial labor and capital movement from the EAC to those countries. Indeed, recently the Republic of South Sudan expressed fears that labor from the EAC was already displacing the local labor market, leading to high unemployment of the local population. You had, there was a debacle over, the government of South Sudan ordering foreign employees to get out of their country. So the EU enlargement experience can inform how EAC will respond to such predicament. And just lastly, realizes the movement of both capital, it liberalizes both capital and labor markets. So, and promotes inter-regional trade through the creation of a common customs territory. And the consequences for me are predictable. So especially for the employment sector. So the EU experience shows that any worker displacement arising from the enlargement was essentially because the nature of the post-accession economy required highly skilled labor. This morning we've talked about, we've mentioned that efficiency is costly. So the cost of integration comes from accrues to efficiency. So it required a highly skilled labor and a more advanced technology. But we have already noted in this seminar that EAC development and trade has not been pro-jobs. So this has been repeated. So EAC integration has featured mainly infrastructure development, which in the short term does not create a lot of jobs. In fact, it was also observed earlier that EAC projects sometimes lead to displacement of workers. That has also been there. So think of the one-stop border post being constructed at the EAC state frontiers. So TIMEA has even acknowledged that the upgrading or revamping of those borders has led to significant loss of livelihoods or even jobs. So, and this is, for me, mainly because those projects require higher skills than those that are available. So, for instance, these new one-stop border posts, they have technology, they have that. Some of the people who have been working at the borders will not be able to work there. Where are they going to work? So, so this is mainly because those projects, as I've said, require skills that the people around there do not have. So, and because of this, many companies, and you can see this, involved in EAC infrastructure development are usually forced to import skilled labor from abroad. So we've seen the Chinese coming to build our road, and they have everyone, to those who are digging. Because we have this mega, we have the SGR railway that is going to link the Northern Corridor as a mega infrastructure project, but we don't have that local, the local skilled labor that can do that. So we have to get people from outside. So I want to state, EAC anticipated the complex nature of the new economic dispensation by providing pre-accession support to candidate countries in the form of financial and technical assistance. So EAC, in my opinion, will need, both in deepening its integration and in anticipation of the accession of new members, to provide capacity building support to both existing and even potential member states. This could be in the form of financial or technical assistance, and could be used to enhance political, economic, and institutional capacities of each country to deal with the consequences of integration. Finally, where ESC projects lead to displacement of workers or loss of jobs, I think there should be compensation.
What should be done, it should be more and more practical. So to start with, I think the presenter stands upside down. So I would like to make him upright, stand upright. The EU enlargement. So what did it bring to the EU in terms of two items? That's number one, in terms of customs union, and number two, in terms of common market. And number three, there can be other issues, other matters. And with these two issues, common market and customs union, can we learn from the EU? So there is a general issue here. Can EAC learn from what happened in EU? That is a general question. I think the paper should not deal with this general question. The specific one is on the enlargement, on the economic colonialism of EU, economic expansion of EU, the eastern expansion of EU. Can we learn? That means the eastern expansion of EU from year 2004, what changes in the common market and customs union has brought within the EU, and specifically within the new colonized Central and Eastern European countries. That's what we should learn from. So, concerning the customs union, I think the changes, the major changes, major lessons that we can learn is the lessons of our governments. Because our governments deal with customs. All governments of the EAC, or some governments of the EAC. So provide the evidence. The presenter could have provided more and more evidences on the customs union. And one of them is are the procedures concerning customs. In Europe, we have the general procedures, the general laws, European laws or regulations on customs based on a particular agreements, like a Lisbon Agreement or Brussels Agreement and so on and so forth. So that I expected the presenter to tell us about such lessons, to draw. Are there agreements here on customs? Arusha agreements or Kigali agreements, Bujumbura agreements, Nairobi agreements on customs within this region, the EESC. That I would be very, very happy to hear from from the presenter, because the procedures are there, the borders are still there, but how porous are these borders? Because we have heard that yesterday that there are still some informal trade going on. What does it mean? That means that the borders are still not porous enough. They are not removed. And then number two, after the customs union, number two is the common market. So concerning the common market, whom do we aim at? The first person that we aim at, the common market, are the producers, are the manufacturers. So what lessons can we learn from the EU enlargement? That means from the East and Eastern and Central Europe, those countries that were annexed to the EU, the industries. Is that only one movement? That means some industries from Germany, Italy, France, the Netherlands are established in Romania, Bulgaria, and so on and so forth. What have we heard from your presentation? Then the next thing is on the common market, the common person, the consumer. What about, can we learn from that, this enlargement? The issue of access, the issue of availability, and among others, these issues help or assist to reduce poverty in the countries. So I think there's need to be specific rather than to look at the EU. I think the specificity of it is on the enlargement. The enlargement of EU and its impact on customs and common market within the EU, particularly the eastern part of EU, and what can we learn from such expansion in the ESC. Then the next thing is, maybe he could have also talked much about the expansion of ESC. We had only the expansion of the West. So we annexed Rwanda and Burundi. What about the expansion of the North? You have explained something. Somalia, Ethiopia, and the Republic of Southern Sudan. And what is the expansion of the East? Seychelles, Madagascar, Mauritius, and Comoro. So, very, very good study, but I think it needs some more information on this so that we can say that the enlargement has brought these changes on the common market and the custom unions in Europe. And these changes we can learn for the better of our countries within the ESC.
To begin with, there are different understandings when someone presents. For me, the takeaway from his presentation is that whenever new members join, what happens? There are costs. And if they are anticipated, then that may be good. So that's the message that I'm taking away from him. It doesn't mean that, yes, waste our time. So that's the lesson I'm taking. Now, economic theory aside, economic theory says capital has a tendency to move from where it is highly concentrated to place where it is less concentrated. That is granted in theory. But in practice, it has been the case, especially for the continent of Africa. A study was done and a book was written called How Capital Flight Bled the Continent by Leonie Dukumana and James Boyce. And it says, from 1970 to 2004, Africa has, in general, has been a net creditor. Capital has been flying away from this continent to the West. So when you try to apply the case of EU and East Africa, it may be the case that theory may not apply. There are cases that the capital may not be moving within the EAC. It could continue as it used to be, flying outside. So when you make the two, that if there is an increase, that the tendency within the membership, right now there are 5, but in future it may increase. We want South Sudan to join. But even if we join tomorrow, it's not guaranteed that capital flight is going to be avoided. So that's the point that I want to make. The next question that I want to bring about is that is the potential, or you made a point, just a clarification, that last month there was an order from the Ministry of Labor in South Sudan. The order was based on an ordinance that was passed in 2011, which says there's a need to South Sudanize, where if you look at the banking sector, close to 100 employees, let's take Kenya Commercial Bank, a large number of employees are not South Sudanese. So the government made a point that let us move toward closing the gap such that by the end of 5 years, in the banking sector, we need to have at least 80% being South Sudanese. That didn't happen. So this ordinance directive was passed, or at least it was issued, but it remained muted. Until now, it's not taken into effect because, of course, South Sudan was in conflict, and we cannot afford to have more front fighting. So at the moment, things remain the way they are. If you go to the banking sector, it is dominated by our brothers from East Africa. If you go to hospitality industry, it is dominated by our brothers from East Africa. So in case of South Sudan, the labor market is dominated by our brothers, the banking sector, and all this. So in that regard, the fear may be unfounded. And that's what I need to say. Thank you.
My name is Philip Bataboro from South Sudan. Yes, they talked about this comparative advantage taking EU and the EAC. But I wonder why you didn't talk about the 1970 of the East African trade bloc. And I understand that was heading to a demise. And we could learn an example from that. What happened? So I was just saying, why could you just have that comparative advantage to make your point or your presentation impressive?
Mine is just a simple question. We have been, since yesterday, talking of the ESC, where the concentration is on infrastructure. And you raised it and said, and other people have been commenting on that there is no job creation. And toward the end of your presentation, you talked of the compensation for those who are jobless. So I'm wondering, who is to compensate these people and how? Because I think we need practical solutions so that if we have to address policy issues, then we know who is to do what and when. Thank you.
Your presentation, I think, was very good, but I think it would have been better if you gave good example for East Africa, because even the 5 partner states right now, only 2 recently joined 7 years ago. So it would have been good if you could have given an analysis of the gains or losses after Burundi and Rwanda joined the EAC community, because those are relatively new, even before we go to Somalia and South Sudan. In addition to that point, I think that it is interesting to compare, at least on anecdotal evidence, no scientific research on my part. When you give the example of Eastern and Western Europe, the EU 15 and the EU 10, it seemed like labor was moving from the new members to the old members, from the east to the west. But I think from anecdotal evidence in the EAC, labor has been moving from the old members to the new members and potentially to the potential members in South Sudan, as they have just said. So I think our market is completely different because unemployment is relatively high even among the older members. Skills are more concentrated among the older members. And even another potential benefit I would have anticipated is the skills transfer from the older members to the newer members that did not refer to. Rwanda has been hiring a lot of English teachers from Kenya to Rwanda. There have been a lot of architects in Rwanda from other parts in the region. So if we have a phased approach, like the example of South Sudan, whereby in 10 years you expect all the architects or teachers to be from that particular country, those are other potential benefits of this labor migration that we could also look at instead of even compensation, because that opens up a lot of political debate on why, or how to compensate people. Thanks.
Mine is brief. Basically, in this case, you're trying to relate EAC with the EU. And basically, the question to me was, you should also explain about the pace of integration. I think that has an implication in terms of all the issues that we have discussed there. Because, for example, if EAC, for example, is too fast in terms of deepening, then what does that mean in terms of